How big is the monster of Facebook? And I'm not trying to use the term monster pejoratively, but I have this conversation with people, and for clarity, I know almost nothing about the internet or Facebook, and I feel like the people I'm talking to don't either. But we postulate on, how much of Facebook is run by people versus
Hmm.
machines. I mean, it seems like if they have
Hmm.
on the 60 Minutes interview that I was watching with you, it said 2.8 billion users on Facebook, 60% of the people who are internet connected. Is that actually being run by people, or are people managing machines and processes?
So we're now actually up to something like 3.2 or 3.3 billion. So it's crazy,
Wow.
like half of 500 million more people. It's a huge number of people, more than the number of people in the United States are now on Facebook compared to when I came forward 2.5 years ago.
Wow.
Um, I think one of the things that concerns me is, part of why I came forward was the part of Facebook that was supposed to be concerned, at least when it came to social stability, around what's known as low prevalence, high severity problems. So that's like, you have your typical interaction with Facebook. In general, it's pretty good. It adds a lot of value to people's lives. But sometimes there's that 1%, 2% that has a disproportionate negative outcome. We need to have a group that is rewarded for thinking about complicated problems, that isn't just motivated to, or isn't incentivized to just move that number up without questioning, is this the right number? There's that part of Facebook got dissolved after the 2020 election. On the flip side of that, so let's imagine now we're talking about kids. The same people whose job was to advocate for the same kind of questions around well-being of children, those teams were incredibly small. And so when we look at, again, this is one of these things that came out of the lawsuit from the AGs. And remember, 44 states are involved so far, right? 44 states never agree on anything except for maybe opiates,
Yeah.
tobacco lawsuits.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the critical memos came out right after my testimony, where one of the most senior executives in the company wrote Mark Zuckerberg a memo and said, "Hey, we're saying we're doing all these things publicly. We're not staffing our internal teams to actually do those things. Like, we have a gap. It's not huge. It's like 40 people. It's not like 100 people. It's not like 200 people. It's like maybe 40 people, maybe 20 of those are engineers. We just need some more people if we're going to actually try to ask questions about kids' well-being." And that got shot down because there wasn't money available by the CFO, and Mark didn't back them up. Right. So
There
it's one
wasn't
of these
money
things where,
available in $1 trillion company. Okay.
yeah, yeah, they were making tens of billions of dollars of profit. And the Senate actually estimated back in January, like during the trial, not the trial, excuse me, the hearing, with all those tech CEOs, they estimated that we're talking about in the order of low tens of millions of dollars. Like, we're not even talking about $50 million for them to actually just meet what they said they were doing for kids. And they said that money just wasn't available.
And in the scope and scale of a business that's making billions per year, that's probably a day's revenue.
Tens of billions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a day's revenue.
Unquestionably.
That's round off error on their P&L. It's unconscionable to me that people can justify those decisions. And that knee-jerk reaction is like, screw Facebook. Everybody should jump off of this. And then you remember the vast majority of the world uses it as a different mechanism than
Yeah.
people checking in with their grandparents.
I got asked by a journalist today, if you could work at Facebook again, would you? And I gave the exact same answer I've given since the day I came forward, which is I would, of course, work for Facebook again, because we don't get to give up on it, right? Like,
Yeah.
these companies, like, it's very easy to be critical of TikTok. It's very easy to be critical of Twitter. It's very easy to be critical of Facebook. Any of these companies, if they said, "Francis, we'd like to offer you a job," as long as it wasn't like sit in the corner so you stop talking publicly, as long as they offered me a real job where I could work on something, I would, because we don't get to give up on these systems. There's whole countries where small businesses don't have their own websites, they have Facebook pages. You don't call people on a phone number, you call them on WhatsApp. Like,
Yeah.
we don't get to give up on these when the most vulnerable are the most dependent on them.
How aware do you think Mark Zuckerberg is
Mm.
about all of this?
Mm. So that's, again, so I have to say, like, very, very infrequently am I like, have you read this legal filing? It's so juicy. Like, very rarely am I going to tell you to read, something written by a lawyer. But one of the things that's super interesting about the filing is I think they do a really good job of painting kind of a slice of life of what's it like to sit around in an executive meeting with Mark Zuckerberg, right? So there are, over and over again, executives tried to help him make responsible decisions. And he didn't rise to the opportunity. And you have to start asking questions around like, why? So one of the examples they call it in there is when Snapchat started doing augmented reality, and like everyone started getting excited about like you can be a cat, that kind of thing. And Instagram rushed in and was like, we can do it too. And almost immediately, someone made a filter that let you simulate plastic surgery. So you get all the markup, like drawn on your face with
Great.
markers. They simulate afterwards, all this stuff.
That's what the world
like
needs.
you do.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, and that's what we need like 10-year-olds doing, right? Because remember, there's 10-year-olds on this app, there's 8-year-olds on this app, right? That the face palm is the correct gesture. So understandably, there was a huge press cycle being like, this is not a great idea. And so Facebook announces we've banned, if you're simulating plastic surgery, that's banned. What they didn't tell people was, and I went to go look these articles up because like I like to do a lot of visuals when I do public speaking. If you run a conference, what funds my work is public speaking, so I'm always available. So I like to have visuals of like when I tell stories like this, this is what's going on. So I go looking for what's being described in this filing, and it doesn't say it's a temporary ban. It says it's banned. So in reality, it was only a 6-month ban. And during that 6 months, Meta hired 21, 22 external experts to write a big report being like, is this bad? Give us more context. And the experts wrote back and was like, this is bad. A bunch of internal executives were like, we don't make any money on this. It's a horrible look. Like, you don't have to be a cognitive scientist that specializes in kids. No, this is bad. This is bad. We make no money from it. We just shouldn't do this. The executives got together. There was a meeting that was supposed to be with Mark to be like, let's ban this for real. Like, let's do a forever ban. The day before the meeting, he cancels the meeting. A week later, he sends out an email saying, this feels really paternalistic. There's very clearly market demand for this. And I haven't seen any evidence of harms. And so it's like one of these things where how is it possible like that there could be such a disconnect? And the only explanation I can come to is, Mark has been building Facebook. He's been building Meta since he was 19 years old, right? Like this company is inextricably part of his identity. There's a saying, it's very hard to convince someone of something that their livelihood depends on, right? Yeah. Like something against it. In this case, I think it's even harder because, if you say your product is hurting people, it's like my life's work is hurting people. And I think it's one of these things where he hasn't had a chance to emotionally mature from like being a 19-year-old. He's always been the CEO. He's always been surrounded by people who told him, you're adding so much good to the world. You have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And so I think that's where this weird cognitive dissonance comes in, is because he's so isolated and he hasn't had a chance to be like, I can admit I have some flaws. I can admit I need to do some work. It doesn't mean I'm not also bringing a lot of good value to the world.